welcome back to Four Authors and a Mystery. This is episode 2. We're so glad you could join us. Just as a reminder, I'm Kiersten Modglin, author of the Misses series.
I'm Laurèn Lee, author of When Houses Burn.
I'm Renee, author of the Savannah PD series.
And I'm Emerald O'Brien, author of the Knox and Shepherd Mystery series.
Last month, we asked our readers to choose topics for a discussion. We did polls in our groups, and we are so excited to congratulate the winners, Carla T. and Allison W. So congrats, guys. We're going to be discussing the topics that you suggested. Don't forget, if you want to shout out in the next video, just be sure to give us suggestions in the open polls that we'll do on our author pages and in our groups.
So the first topic we're going to talk about tonight is our research process and what kind of things go into the pre-work of our novels or our series.
So I've kind of done a lot of different types of research. I was actually a psychology major in college. I have a degree in psychology, so I have that my background. And but some of the topics that I've written about, I had to do more research on because I didn't actually know too much about them. So online has been a great resource. I've actually used family members who know medical stuff so that they could answer, some of those type of questions that I've had in my Savannah PD series. I've even actually gone to Savannah. We just got back from there a couple weeks ago, and it was more of like an adventure just to kind of, roam around the city and see all the different places that my characters, go to and visit. And so, yes, that's
awesome.
Yeah.
You went there.
That's fun.
So for me, kind of the same thing. I do a lot of internet research. That's honestly the biggest part of my research. I have talked to a few different people for different things. I talked to a 911 dispatcher about a few different scenes from my book and had her look over it to make sure in a scene where the character had to call 911, that everything happened the way it should. I've talked to a few different police officers about different scenes, but definitely the biggest resource for me is just the internet. I tend to do fictional towns, so visiting a town doesn't really help me in my research. I base them off of real places generally, but I do make them up, so I have a little bit of artistic freedom there, I guess. Yeah. So for me, the internet's number one for sure.
So I also do a lot of research online. I'm in several different Facebook groups. I always pick people's brains, and I also write most of my stories in fictional towns, just because if I've never been there before, I don't want to make it, inaccurate or not be able to capture the feel of it. The only town or city that I've used that's a real place is my hometown, Buffalo, New York. So my paranormal series is based there, so that was very easy to use real places, just tweak some names a little bit. So I do a lot of research online, ask a lot of people. I had one book where I talked to some active military members because I wanted to capture that experience well. And I also do a lot of reading other books, movies, TV shows, where I think there's an accurate portrayal of things that I want to write about. So I pretty much just try to be a sponge and absorb everything I can get my hands on.
That's the best part, is being able to watch TV and consider it work. This is research, but I'm going to sit here and watch Netflix.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you can still feel guilty when you do that. It feels like it's not work. Even though you are technically learning things that you will incorporate, if not in the current book you're writing, then, another one down the line. So it's true. Like you guys, I am predominantly researching on the internet. And so I usually do light research when I get the idea for a story. So I'll just go online, and anything that I don't already know, like Rachel was saying, about a character's profession or something like that, I'll look up online first. And then if I feel like I don't if I don't have enough information, or maybe it's not accurate, because that's the thing. I don't know if you guys have found this, and it's a little different because I have to specifically type in for Canada because all of my books are set in Canada, even though they are almost all fictional towns. I name check a couple places like Toronto sometimes, but even for that, like it was about a school in Toronto where there were murders happening, and so I made up the school. But especially for Canada, it's a little tough to find information on law enforcement and things like that. So online with people online in groups and things like that, like you were saying, really does help. And then for non-law enforcement kind of positions, then like Rachel was saying, it's easier to contact a person about that. I've rarely ever done that though. I think like one time I contacted someone who worked for a private investigator. So that was, just a little bit of that kind of research, but usually it's just light research at the beginning. And then just as I go, if something pops up, then I'll, again, just online research mostly. But some of the places are inspired by real places that I've either been to or lived by and that kind of thing. So yeah, but most of it's online.
So that was one thing we could kind of talk about, like diving a little deeper, was researching up front or as you go. Like Emerald kind of answered a little bit, but like, how do you do it?
I research as I go, typically because I don't always know where my story's going to go. So I don't know what I need to know until I get to it. And sometimes I spend my writing time actually online researching, trying to find things out. And when I wrote the first book in the Savannah PD series, I had never been to Savannah. I was just trying to pick a place that had an interesting history. And so before I started writing it, I did some research just on the area itself. And then after I wrote that one, before I wrote the second one, we actually went to Savannah, so I could actually see some of these places that I had just Google searched. So
that's neat.
Yeah, that's great.
So I'm kind of the opposite. I can't do research while I'm writing. If I'm writing and if I need to research something, it distracts me. So when I'm writing, I need to write. So if there's something that I know I need to research, I will highlight it and then I'll go back later, or I'll research beforehand, or even after I'm done and just do all my research all at once. But if I'm writing, I need to write, otherwise I'll get distracted and I will not hit my word count for the day.
I'm kind of the same way. I do like a lot of research before I start. Whatever I know, like Emerald said, that I don't know that I'm going to need to know, I look it up. But then as I write, I have to turn everything off too. I cannot get on the rabbit hole that is the internet, because I'll be watching a giraffe have a baby for 3 hours when I'm supposed to be researching something. So
Right.
I do the same thing as far as just, I will like leave a blank and like underline it where I need to, put in parentheses, research this later or something. I try to make myself a note that like I need to go back and figure that out and make it make sense. But I mean, our stories change so much, and we've talked about that. So it is hard to guess where your research is going to need to go, because things just come up and change.
The craziest thing that I've ever had to research, and actually one of the things that I learned most about during the second book in my Savannah PD series, my killer was strangling people, but that's not how he killed them. He was draining them of their blood. And so I had to figure out, okay, is that actually possible? Can someone drain a body of blood? I mean, I know they do that in autopsies, but how else can you do that? So I had to look up, and then I had to ask medical professionals, like, okay, how does this work? So that was probably the craziest thing that I've ever had to research and look up.
It's funny. I feel like we're going to have a lot in common here. Like, raise your hand if you've had to research like how much blood a body has, how much blood a body can lose without. Yeah, it's so true. That was going to be one of mine. The weirdest one, I guess, that I've ever researched was it's gruesome. But it's about burning a body, and how long it takes for the flesh to be gone enough so that you can't recognize who the person was. And yeah. Yeah. So that was, I definitely thought that the Canadian FBI was going to be after me on that one.
I would just say that no one checks your search history.
Yeah.
So I don't have anything quite specific like that, but with one of my books, Running in Circles, I wanted to dive deep into more of the psyche of a serial killer and, their background, where they come from, why they do the things they do. So that took me down the rabbit hole of, number one, watching Mindhunter on Netflix, then reading the book by John Douglas.
Such a good show. I should read the book. Yeah, so good.
Very good. And then
Say about the thing. Tell them about your book and how. Yeah.
Okay, I will. So I also read another book by John Douglas that was more empirical, with data and facts about serial killers. So if you've seen the show, not a spoiler, they do a study where they talk to imprisoned serial killers to try to learn more about them. So I also had read the book about all that data. So that helped me a lot write my book. And when it came time to put my book together, I really, really wanted to use a quote from Mindhunter. But, I had to make sure I had the proper permission. So I looked up John Douglas. I believe I just went on his normal website and I emailed him, shot in the dark, didn't expect him to ever see it, let alone read it. But I asked him for permission to use a quote in my book. And he replied fairly quickly and said that I could do so. So in the front of my book, which I think I have a copy. Do I? Here's the book. Sorry, a little self-promotion.
I love it.
In the front, there is a quote from Mindhunters. I'll read it real quick. So, behavior reflects personality. The best indicator of future violence is past violence. To understand the artist, you must study his art. The crime must be evaluated in its totality. There is no substitute for experience, and if you want to understand the criminal mind, you must go directly to the source and learn to decipher what he tells you. And above all, why plus how equals who. So I was really excited to be able to use that quote in my book.
Yeah, awesome.
That's so cool.
Kiersten, what's the weirdest thing you've had to research?
So my book, the Mesa series starts with a book called The Cleaner, which is about a crime scene cleaner. And even though a lot of the more gruesome and gory stuff didn't actually make it into the book, I spent a good month just researching and learning about everything that went into like crime scene cleanup and all of the horrible things that they have to do. And I looked at way too many pictures of crime scenes and watched videos, and it was the most disgusting but awesome thing I've ever done. Like I learned so much, and it was like kind of the same thing. I was like, I'm going to be on FBI watch list by the end of this, because for a month I was like on the computer every day looking up like, what does it take to clean up a body, and what chemicals do you use to clean up a body? And that research went into the other 3 books in the series also, but it was pretty interesting for a while. I learned that so when you watch TV shows, a lot of times when detectives go into like a crime scene, they'll put like something on their nose, like I don't know, big stuff, I think, to put on their nose, like so that they don't smell the body. And I actually, because I was writing that, and I went to look up what it was that they used, and I actually found out that that's just something that they do on TV. I was reading something from like a mortician, and they said that actually if they were to do that, because what you smell like with a body is the like dead particles, and so they're like, if you put like Vicks or whatever on the inside of your nose, it would just like hold them to that Vicks, and so it would just smell worse.
Oh.
We don't really do that, but I thought that was super interesting, because from every movie I'd ever seen, you would think that they would, but they don't.
So most mystery and suspense novels focus on murder, and each of us look at that in a different way and in a different light, writers as well as the readers. some things that might look or seem very morbid and dark and grim to someone might not bother another person at all. So we just want to talk a little bit about how we write the dark subject matter that we write, how we categorize our books, and are there different things that we as writers won't touch when it comes to writing the dark subject matter?
So when I knew that this was one of the winning subjects that we would talk about, I kind of had a little difficulty because from some of my readers, my books had been called dark by them, but I didn't necessarily see them like that. So I created a poll in my reader group, and I asked, what my readers would categorize my books like. And the majority of them said that they did find them dark and creepy and sometimes disturbing. So I think my gauge was a little off with that. Although, writing about dark subject matter, it really is up to, the kind of detail we put in, our experiences, but then the reader's experience, because if people have been through certain traumas, they'll have triggers that are more personal to them. So I'm sure we all try to be respectful of that. And so my readers kind of showed me that they're actually seeing it in more of a dark light. However, they don't find them scary. So I guess I kind of thought that I was writing on the lighter side of mystery, like obviously not cozy mysteries, but just because I don't go into too much detail, which they did agree with on the dark parts. So my horizons have been expanded through that poll.
That's interesting to hear it from your readers, point of view, what they think.
Right.
Good to hear that.
Because now I'm kind of questioning what my readers actually think, as opposed to what I think.
Right. Could be two totally different things.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that it was majority who did say dark, but there were some who thought, oh no, like pretty light, or I'm sensitive and even I don't find it dark, and that kind of thing. So I feel like we'd probably all get a little bit of a mixed bag at least, but it would be interesting to see what the majority of your readers think,
Yeah. We should have all done that.
Well, I only did it because I was a little, I didn't know how I was going to touch the subject from about my books. I can talk about my writing, experiences and things like that and what I think of the subjects, but I didn't, you can't speak for the reader and what they're thinking. So have any of your readers said, oh, your books are so dark, or that kind of thing, or like your psychological suspense?
I've gotten some reviews that say it, especially for the last book of the Mrs. series. That was dark in not like a killy, gory, gruesome way, but just dark with the subject matter that it really touched on. I think it like depends on the book, because I have some books, we all do, some books that are a little bit darker and explore different sides of that darkness, and then some that, are a little bit lighter. But like you said too, it all depends on the reader and their experiences.
I probably get the most comments about the darkness of my books actually from my family members that read my books. I get a lot of, questions, and how did you come up with that? Or did that really happen? And, I get kind of the loving, judgmental looks about, did that really happen to you? So I get the most questions about my style, I would say.
Yeah, that's interesting, because it's so funny, right? We write about these darker things, or we're either from the person who has issues, or they're a killer or a murderer or whatever. But like obviously we're not, so you don't have to be that. You don't have to come from that, the whole write what you know thing. Just like you girls are saying, like your research and having studied psychology both through books and in school, you know what I mean? So I think it's really cool when you can, and it's very empathetic when you can come from another person's perspective, not necessarily like a dark thing that's inside of us.
Yeah. Emerald and I talked the other day about like before I was a parent, like being able to write in the mind of a parent. And I was like, it's funny because it's so hard to write as a parent if you're not one, but like we all write about serial killers every single day and don't find that hard at all. So it's kind of interesting the places that we can go.
Right. And we were talking, and like in terms of sensitivity and things like that, when you talk about like depending on how sensitive the reader is, it's not like necessarily a bad thing, like all things affect them. But as Kiersten and I were talking about, like sometimes it's just circumstance in your life that makes you a little more sensitive during that time, or after a certain event happens, you're more sensitive to that kind of thing. And Kiersten was saying being a mom was part of it.
Yeah, so like really since I've become a mom. So I wrote my first 3 books before I had my daughter. And my second book is called The List, and it is about a serial killer who like controls a whole town by targeting children, like makes their parents do whatever he wants basically by saying if you don't, like your kid's gonna die. And having read it, I wrote it before I had my daughter, but now going back and reading it, I'm like, I don't know, I couldn't have read it now, let alone have written it. And it makes me more sensitive to any kind of book that has to do with like abductions or just anything with children. I just can't do it. And it on even like on a, I don't know, different level, like everything that was once not such a big deal to me, like true crime, didn't bother me. But since I've had my daughter, it's like it's one of those things where like Emerald had said when we were talking, it's you lose that control once you have kids, and it just changes your perspective about a lot of things. So it's changed my writing, and I think my books have actually gotten a little lighter. And if I do go super dark, because I have written some very dark books since I've had her, but I have to kind of get out of that headspace. Like I get really dark, and it messes with me emotionally, and I have to back up and watch some crazy romantic comedy on Netflix to get out of that. So it is, different circumstances change you.
When you guys are writing dark things, do you have to kind of like take breaks, or does it not affect you as much?
It doesn't affect me, which I don't know what that says about me, but I don't really ever. I need a break more if I'm writing something like happy, kind of sad,
Emotional, yeah.
That over the edge. But something dark, that's kind of when I'm in like the best writing place, is when I really get to dig deep and be creepy.
That's awesome.
For me, I don't like, if I'm not comfortable with it, I don't really write it. So it doesn't really, affect me that much. And like Kiersten was saying, for me, I can't write about something happening to children. And I struggled a little bit when I was reading Laurèn's book, her Little Girl Lost book, from Crimson Falls, and just because it dealt with, a child, and that's really hard for me, having to think about like what could happen to them, so I try not to think about that stuff. So that is one of those things that I don't typically pick up and read.
Sorry.
Or write about. No, it's okay. It's okay. It's a good book. It was good. But yes, I don't typically pick those types of things up, and I don't write about them in my books, just because it's one of those subjects for me that it's kind of off limits.
What about you guys? What's off limits for you guys?
I'm kind of the same. For me, I mean, I'll go as dark as I have to with anything else, but with kids and animals, I can't. You're not going to see a kid or an animal get hurt in my books.
I really don't touch sexual assault, anything like that. I have a brief scene in one of my books, but I more allude to something that's going to happen than any details. It's just something that I really try to avoid. I don't know how entertaining something like that can be for someone to really write about it in a whole scene. Anything where that is shown in TV and movies, I just fast forward, and that is probably the only dark thing that's really not entertainment to me. I mean, serial killers, fine, kidnapping's fine, but anything like that, that's not really entertaining for me to write or to watch or read.
Yeah, I feel like from before when we started talking about dark subject matter and what readers think and how I didn't think my books were as dark as my readers did, I think I'm pretty desensitized to a lot. A little bit just by personal choice, and I guess naturally by what I enjoy watching and reading, because I love horror movies, and there is not a horror movie too scary for me. And then I love horror novels, and so much so that there's only a couple of Stephen King's books, who is my favorite author, that actually creep me out at all. There's an author named Mo Hader, M-O, first name, and her books are the scariest I've ever read. And I still loved it. So I think I've read about a lot of different topics. However, like Laurèn said, I don't want to read in detail about sexual assaults. I probably wouldn't, that's the thing, right? I don't really want to read in detail about too many disturbing things other than, I guess, a general kind of torture. You could get into that because that is probably pertinent to the scene, into how much pain someone is going through. But I think we all find ways to kind of write about pain and the trauma of that in a different way, in a not so detailed kind of way, except for when it really counts and when it really matters and we have to show our readers something. So I think it just depends on how you do it. Like I said, I'm sure we all really try to be respectful of certain subject matter. But then again, you have to be true to the story too. And I think my beta readers would probably tell me if I'd gone too far with something, and they haven't yet. So I would listen to that and kind of think about that. And instead of taking it out of the book, I would just decide to go into less detail. Or maybe it, Laurèn was saying, a fade to black kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We need some of that, in our books because of the type of books we write, and because it builds the suspense and, lets the readers and ourselves connect to the story a little bit better. So, I mean, yeah. We wouldn't have the books that we have if we didn't have some part of that in it.
Right. The stakes have to be high. There's got to be something to lose. And in order for things to mean something, exactly. And like you said, keeping the reader in suspense is something I think all of us really aim for in our novels. So it definitely makes sense. Thank you all so much for watching. We got some great feedback about our first episode, and we can't wait to share this one with you. If you're watching right now, and as you watch, feel free to leave a comment about what we've talked about and your thoughts and opinions on that. Just like last time, if you go to the description below, the links to our social media are there, and we will have another open call for suggestions. And we'd love to hear what you'd like us to talk about on the next video. There were some great suggestions this time. Next time, we hope there's even more. And you guys will get to vote on them. So please pay attention to our social media. And also, you can leave suggestions below in the comments here. It's just by a certain time, we may not be able to see them or use them. But again, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to like it below. Make sure to subscribe below, and make sure to ring the little bell beside the subscribe button to make sure you're notified of our videos. Thank you so much to our subscribers so far. We're so excited that we've got some, and we're just beginning.